I tried to be like Rodney. It's upside down. Hey everyone, I'm Alison with Better Half Reviews, and today we're talking about Legacy of You. This comes from Garfield Games. The design is by the famous Shem Phillips, and the art is by Sam Phillips. So let's talk about what this game is about. So Legacy of You is a solo resettable campaign game, and you're going to be working through different rounds and having some successes and probably some failures, and you continue on through the game until you either reach the end of the failure deck or the successful deck. And there is some backstory to this, and rather than trying to say it myself, I'm going to read the flavor text so you have an idea of what this is about, and they say it quite well because there's some history involved. During the reign of Emperor Yao, the people of ancient China were constantly plagued by deadly floods along the Yellow River. Eager to put an end to the devastation, Yao selected Gun, one of his officials, to devise a plan. After 9 years of failed attempts using dams and dikes, Gun's employment came to a questionable end. After his passing, Yu inherited his father's work. Learning from Gun's failures, Yu set out to construct a series of canals to direct the surging river into nearby fields and smaller waterways. The campaign. Legacy of You is a solo-only, fully resettable, non-linear campaign game in which you step into the role of the legendary hero of the Jia dynasty, Yu the Great. It will be your job to build the canals ahead of impending flood, while also defending your growing settlement against neighboring barbarian tribes. With each game, stories will be shared and new gameplay elements added. The campaign features a self-balancing system, which adapts to how well you are doing. The campaign ends once you either win or lose 7 games. So here we have the different decks in the game. You have the red barbarians, the gray townsfolk, the story deck, your huts and canal cards, and also the winning and losing condition cards. So where he's smiling, that's the winning cards, and these are the losing cards. There's a gold version of each at the bottom of the deck. So you shuffle up these ones and put this one on the bottom, because if you get to this card, that means you've won the game. If you get to this card, that means you've lost the game. And by the game, I mean the campaign. So you shuffle these up and you put them up to the side. The story deck isn't something that you need right away, so I'll also put that off to the side. Or if you use the box for storage, I just leave the story deck inside the story deck spot. See here it says where to put everything. That's generally where I keep it. Now to set up your board, you've got the canals and the hut cards. So to set up the canal cards, there are 6 different spots that you'll put them on. So if you flip the cards on the back side, it highlights different sections. So this says, okay, this will go in the 5 and 6, 3 and 4. So I separate them. And then I'm going to shuffle these up. So these all say 1 and 2. Shuffle them, and I'm going to pick 2 of these to go in the first 2 spots. And they match the artwork. The leftover 1s and 2s I'm just going to put back into the box in the huts and canals section. And I'll do the same for the 3s and 4s and 5s and 6s. Next are the huts cards. The back of the card is the bonus that you get when you've built this. So I'm going to shuffle these face up. And then there's 4 spots. I'm going to pick 4 of these, and the extras will go back into the box. And again, the art matches. Now that we've placed our cards, we can set out the buildings. So you have the purple outpost, the green huts, and the orange farms. And then you have your barge and the wave. So the barge is going to start on the first canal card, and the wave starts just behind it, right here. Now for the barbarian deck, I'm going to shuffle these up. And they're going to take up the first spot on the far right. And then you set the deck next to it. And the townsfolk are going to be some of the cards that you'll start with and also fill up the top half of this board. So after you shuffle it, you're going to deal out 10 cards for yourself. and it'll be here. Fill up the row, and the rest go right here. Since the box insert is labeled and it shows you where all the different sections go and all the different components, you can choose to play the game with everything just in the box and set it off to the side, or use your own trays. I'll just leave this in here for now, just to make it easier. And of course, we're going to have the storybook close by in case we have some encounters. So you're going to be playing several different rounds in this game. The round numbers can vary depending on what you do, but you're trying to build up these canals, and as you build up the canals, your barge will move further and further up, and then the game will finish once you've moved your barge off of the board and finished your round. If the wave catches up or surpasses your barge at any time, you lose to flooding. And if the barbarian deck ends up taking all the spots on the top of the board, you will also lose. So to get started, this shows what you'll gain at the beginning of each round. And there are ways to unlock some extra things to get, like building farms will open up some different spaces, or building some huts and tucking cards underneath. But right now, we get 4 cards, a white meeple, a conch shell, and a provision. So what you can do is you're trying to go through your cards up here and up there, you know, spending all your resources, doing as much as you can. When you can't do anything else or you don't want to do anything else, that's when you decide that that round is over, and then you'll reset and get ready for the next round. So the anatomy of the cards. Right here in brown, this shows you if I were to discard this card, I would get these resources immediately. If you want to discard the card all the way up to the townsfolk deck, I could get all these resources. So there is strategy with keeping cards here as opposed to up there, because if you run out, that could cause some issues. I'll talk about that later. And then down at the bottom, it'll show what type of card. There are some things you may unlock that may vary with what you want to have. So there's fish, wheat, milk, and then I believe meat. The bottom of the card shows some different resources that you could get if you tuck this under at the beginning of the round. So right now, I have 1 free space to tuck. I can choose, instead of gaining resources right now, I could tuck it under, and then when I'm resetting the round, in addition to those few things that I get, I would also get an extra card and a conch shell. Some cards give you resources, some cards will give you different colored meeples, and the different colored meeples come in handy with building up these canal cards and also defeating barbarians. So checking out the barbarians, this top part says what meeples you need in order to defeat them. And this will be your reward if you defeat this barbarian. If you don't defeat the barbarian at the end of the round, you're going to have to pay some consequences. This says that you have to get rid of a card, so it would go all the way into the townsfolk deck, or you could pay a blue meeple. This bottom part right here, all your starting cards have zeros. The more that you unlock cards with the story deck, those will have different numbers at the bottom. And that makes it just easier for you to reset or reshuffle things at the end. But if you'll notice, along this top part here, there's different provision numbers. So if I want to defeat this barbarian, I'm going to have to be able to pay 3 provisions in order to even go there to defeat him. Likewise, these are the townsfolk cards. If I want to purchase those cards, I need to use the same amount of provisions that it's shown. So that far left card has no provisions, so I can gain that one for free. So maybe for my first action, I'll decide to take that card. When you gain a card, you put it into your discard pile, and the deck does not slide down. It'll slide down when you reset your round. So that one was free. Say I want to get that first card, it has 1 provision for the cost, so I would pay it, and then I could take the card and put it in the discard. Currently, there is a way that you can do some trading. So up here, if you have 3 conch shells, you can trade it in for 1 wood, or 3 conch shells for 1 brick. As you build and unlock things, you may unlock some better trading options or different options. So let's say I'm going to put this one into the exhausted pile and gain the white meeple. And then I'm going to put this card into the exhausted pile to gain the provision and conch shell. Now, with what I have in my resources, I do have enough to unlock the first canal. So what I would do is, this says I have to pay 2 white meeples and 2 conch shells. So I'm going to turn that in. I get to move the barge off the board. If you want, you can use the back of the rulebook even has a section for the barge to go onto. The bottom of the card shows my reward, so I would get 1 brick, 1 wood, and then you have this little golden turtle with a 3. That will be from the storybook. You flip to the right number, so here's number 3. It continues on, and wherever you see these arrows, that's going to tell you what you're supposed to do. So generally, it will tell you to discard this card, get rid of it, whatever, and do some extra things or gain something. So then here is the history spot. That's where you're going to put all the cards that they've told you to get rid of. And if they tell you to put it back into the setups, you'll do that. But generally, if they have a turtle and you've already revealed it, it's going to go into history. Revealing some of those cards, some good things may happen, some bad things may happen. You can read the flavor text to kind of get the idea of the story going on. And now that that card has been taken off, I have a different trading option. So that says if I trade in 2 shells, I could get a provision. And it also opens up a little square space where you can place your buildings. So here, if I were to pay the resources to build one of these things, I could place it here and I would get the conch shell once. We did start with an open space to place a building, and that would provide you a provision. That is just a one-time thing, so once you place the building, that is not available for the rest of the game. So let's say that I'm just going to spend the rest of my cards, get some more provisions, and then I'm going to get a red meeple. Again, remember, if I wanted to get both these things in the brown and the red, you'd put it over into the discard pile of the townsfolk. And it is always a good idea to build up your deck of cards, so maybe I'm going to spend some of these provisions to get some more townsfolk. So I've got 3. I could buy this one and maybe one of those. Put it straight into your discard pile and trade these in. I don't have any more cards left. I don't have any provisions to be able to get any more townsfolk, but I do have a meeple. So if you have a meeple, what you can do is place them on one of these spots. We start with just 1, but if you build these huts, you're going to open up some more spots. So if I place them here, it says I get 1 provision. And the nice thing is when you're resetting for the next round, any meeples that you have placed up here go back into your collection. So I haven't lost that red meeple. I'll get to have them later. But let's say I didn't spend this last card. I still have it because at the end of the round, when you can't do anything else, you're going to have to deal with your barbarians. So remember this barbarian up here? Since I didn't defeat him, it says I have to either get rid of a card or give them a blue meeple. I don't have a blue meeple, so I do have a card. I would put it over into the townsfolk discard pile. So it's no longer in my hand, not available, but I don't have to deal with him for a second. So what you're going to do for setting up the game is you're going to move the leftover townsfolk cards down, and then for barbarians, you're going to refill it up depending on how many barbarian symbols are on the board. So right up here, that top, that says the red card +1, so that means we're going to add 1 more barbarian to our group. So I'm going to slide him over and add 1 new one. So again, that's what you need to defeat him. If you don't defeat him, you're going to have to pay one of those things. That's your reward. And then I'm going to fill up with townsfolk. And then I move into the harvest phase, so resetting. So the barge is going to start here on my next card. I'm going to draw 4 cards and gain those resources, and then I'd be ready to go. However, just for example, say that I had spent these resources to build a farm, and you place it on one of the square options that you have open. If I moved into the harvest phase, see this has the harvest phase as well, that would mean that I would get an additional white meeple, or this one is an additional provision, or this is any color meeple besides white. If at any point this deck runs out and I need to draw from it, that's when you're going to reshuffle and move the wave. So if I got to the point where I needed to do that, you move the wave up. And remember, if the wave reaches or surpasses you, you lose according to flooding. And then you're going to read the encounter card that matches with that. So what happens if you build an outpost? If I build an outpost, that means it has, I'm just going to show you. It has the white meeple with an equal sign. If I reveal this one, that means I can use yellow and white meeple for the same thing. So if I wanted to build this hut, I could have one white meeple and one yellow meeple, and that would work for the 2 meeples that I need. So there can be some strategy to which buildings you may want to unlock depending on the barbarians you're going to have to deal with or the canals that you want to build. So for example, I've unlocked the yellow. It might be a good idea for me to unlock the black as well because I've got some barbarians who require black meeples. So I could use more trading in and out of the white, black, and yellow for all the same thing. Say I have enough to build this, but I don't have an open square on the board in order to place this somewhere. I wouldn't be able to build this. I would have to build my canal first to open up a spot, and then I'd be able to build. So if I did build it, flip it over, it gives you a bonus. Sometimes it's a resource. In this case, it is a story from the storybook. So you'd go up and find that section, and you're going to get rid of this card. Something to keep in mind. But you don't want to let your townsfolk pile get slim, because if you run out of cards, that will mean that the wave will move up more, or if you don't have cards to give the barbarians, then you'll run into trouble there. And as a quick side note, as you're playing the game, if you want to keep track of like what's coming up, what you're going to be revealing, underneath here, they have a little highlight of what's actually revealed here and shows you down below. And the more that you build, the more those barbarian things that are going to come up, so barbarians will start to invade. So you're going to continue play, working through the rounds, trying to move the barge all the way off the board by staying ahead of the flood. But if you aren't defeating your barbarians and they fill up the whole row, you will lose. Or if you need to give them a card and you don't have one to give them, you will lose. So when you get to the end of the game, if you were successful in completing all the canals and moving the barge off the board, you flip it over and you're just going to read your scenario. If you failed, you're going to read one depending on what happens. Where if the barbarians filled up the board or you weren't able to take a card when you needed to, your deck was empty, or if the flood got you. Once you read that, you're going to discard the card and move on. If you do end up failing a game, generally they'll do something to give you a card or a bonus that may help you in the future. And if you are doing really well in winning, they may give you some cards that make it a little bit more difficult. All in all, that's the gist of Legacy of You. Alright, so I want to talk about some of the pros and maybe some of my cons that I have for Legacy of You. So one of my pros would be that Garfield Games generally has really good graphics for figuring out icons, and things are just very easy to understand. So like on the board, it's very understandable of like, okay, these spaces are covered in the game once the card is taken off. There's a square space where you can place one of your buildings. And then the buildings at the beginning of the game start down here, covering these spots, opening up options as you go. And on the cards, it's very easy to follow of, you know, this is the cost, this is things that you can earn once it's tucked under the board. Just quick and easy to understand, and if you've played any Garfield game, some of these icons will look a little bit familiar to you. And I like that that makes it the ease of entry just that much easier. And to go along with that, the setup is also helpful too, because you see the art on the board, the art on the cards where they're supposed to go matches up with the art on the board. So it's like, oh, okay, this card is supposed to go in one of these spots. Flip it over after you access it and gain whatever the thing is on the back. I liked that with the story deck, this is the stuff that you're going to reveal throughout the game. You don't want to have spoilers, so they have a front and a back card to help contain everything. And when you're supposed to pick out the card that you need, I try not to look at it and you have all the numbers in the corner, so it's like, oh, okay, you read a passage and it says go to card 24, so you just kind of scroll over and just yank card 24 out and you place it into wherever they tell you. And speaking of wherever they tell you to put things, they have this organizer, and I kind of hard to show you, maybe I'll try to take a picture. But underneath it has pictures of where everything's supposed to go, so you know what spot the cards are going into, what spots the tokens are going into. But as you're like going through cards and maybe like, oh, you discard something, they have a little spot for where you discard cards that you don't have to worry about anymore. There's spots for where to like put cards you need for future setup, and for like the barbarians and the townsfolk cards. So it's nice to keep things organized as you're working through your different games. And then you got big spots for your peoples. And also, I just love the big wave token. And then here's your little barge. Anyway. But yeah, so everything is wooden for the pieces other than the provisions and the conch shells. Which I kind of wish they had made those wooden too, but I know that probably costs money. Another pro would have to be the storybook. So you heard me read the premise of it. As you're going through, there are some cards that will have these little gold turtles on them, and that when you complete that card, you have to go to that part in the story. So this says, okay, go to story number 12. So you open up your logbook, find the gold turtle 12, and then you read the passage and then do whatever it says to do. Some passages are longer than others, but I like that, like, if you're interested in having flavor text and having the story and having it be more thematic, you can read through that paragraph and it's like, oh, this happened, or oh no, the barbarians have come. Take this card and add it to the barbarian deck. And if you're not interested in the story aspect, you can just skip to the bottom where the little arrows are and find out, okay, take this card, put this thing, gain these things, etc. I admit there are some times that I was a little bit busy, so I didn't read as much of the flavor text, but most of the time I was reading it. So it was kind of cool to see the story play through my game. And of course, something that's very helpful, I like that on the back of the rule book, they put what everything is, so all your meeples, the tokens, some of the different symbols you'll be seeing on the cards, all right here, quick and easy access. And as you're playing, if you move the boat, it's supposed to move off for the round because you can only do it once per round. There's even a little nifty spot to put your boat here to remember, if you want to. Another pro, overall, I've always been pretty satisfied with the rules that Garfield Games does. It just lays it out very well, so it helped with learning the game. I generally like to watch videos to learn games from, but they do a pretty good job with their rulebook where I was able just to go through that myself and figure out how to play the game. Okay, so we talked about pros, now let's maybe talk about some of my cons with the game and gameplay. I mentioned that the organizer was nice in that it kept your components in place, or during your game, and having all the different sections and what types of cards to put where, which was very helpful when I'm playing the game. However, as nice as this is and as helpful as it is during gameplay, once you start your campaign and you've put the cards away in the different spots, you have to make sure to not let this get tipped or shaken at all, because the cards will not all stay in place. Because, I mean, you have the game board that goes over it and the rule book, but there's still a bit of, like, gap between the top of the insert and the box. And so I had this mid-games, or mid-campaign, and I put it away, and it moved a couple different times, and I put it sideways once. People store things vertically sometimes. I went back to play my campaign, and the cards were all messed up to the point that, like, I couldn't figure out what I had revealed and what hadn't been revealed, and so I basically had to reset the campaign and start over. Which I kind of needed a refresher anyway, but it was like, I was like halfway through and I don't know. So just be forewarned, if you start the campaign, when you put it all away, keep it horizontal and do not let it get shaken or slightly messed up, or else your campaign might get a little bit messed up. Maybe a potential con, or just something to be aware of, is as you're working through the game, you're trying to do the same thing each time, where you're trying to move the barge all the way and not let the wave catch up to you, while, maybe unlocking some buildings and some powers and tucking cards. You're doing those same things each time. Yes, you may reveal different cards that'll unlock some different things and maybe get some special abilities, but if you don't like anything to be repetitive, I don't know if this game would be for you, because you're doing the same thing every time. There are different strategies you can go for, where, I forget the official names of the buildings, but like there's the purple, green, and orange buildings. It's like, oh, maybe you try to unlock some of the buildings that let you trade out different colors, or maybe you unlock buildings that help you get extra tokens at the beginning of your round. Other than that, it's pretty much the same. I did enjoy working through the puzzle, but I can see how if you're playing this like straight through, like playing this very consistently to try to get through the campaign, it might feel like a little bit much. This is a game that I would say I'd play a couple games of, take a little break, take a couple more games, and like not play it straight through or else you'll be like, oh my goodness. But knowing it is resettable, it is kind of nice where it's like right now I feel done with the game, but maybe down the line when I've kind of forgotten about stuff, I might be willing to go back into it. So let's talk about how I feel overall about the game. This game is not always easy. I've had like a handful of games that were like, oh man, yeah, everything was going my way, super easy. But this game overall is pretty tough to win because as you are more successful, there's going to be things in the game that make it even harder. And there's some games that just go down to like the luck of the draw, and there's like no way you can come back from it with like certain barbarians, and you're not getting the certain meeple colors that you need. It can be tough. But I do enjoy the challenge of the puzzle. So like maximizing what I can get, and then as you unlock different things, there's some different trade-ins you can do. And so it's like, okay, if I trade in 2 of these shells to get this, maybe I can buy this card, and that card will help me later, etc. So I do find it fun and challenging in that way of figuring out the puzzle. But now that I've played through the campaign 1.5 times because of that one time I had to reset, I feel pretty done with the game. I enjoyed it, had fun, but I don't feel the need to like dive back into it anytime soon. I'm not necessarily going to get rid of the game. I've also reset it because Bryce said he's interested in trying it. But right now I'm like, this is good. I'm feeling kind of done with it. Maybe I'll come back to it in the future. I liked that in the storybook, depending on what goes on and how well you do throughout the campaign, there's different endings that you can read and things that will kind of flow that way. So not all the endings are the same, so I appreciated that, it was unique to what happened to my game and how well I did. So my small qualms aside with some of like the insert and how things are kept, maybe mention that I'm not sure how colorblind friendly this game is. There are different colors, but all the meeples are the same shape, so I don't know if that'll help. The buildings are all different shapes with the different colors, so that's also a good thing. But overall, Legacy of You, solid game, cool puzzle, and for those who like flavor text and theme, it is in there with the storybook if you're willing to do the reading. But yeah, so overall, I do recommend checking out Legacy of You from Garfield Games. I'll put a link in the description down below where you can maybe find a copy. But yeah, so I'm Allison from Better Half Reviews. Happy gaming! Rodney. It's upside down.